going to turn the tables a bit. It's kind of a fun aspect of Toastmasters. We have a full range of expertise and topics and goals for our speeches. And so we're going to change from kind of an informative speech to what we consider an inspirational speech. Bob today is going to deliver his 10th and final speech out of the Confident Communicator Manual. The CC10 is meant to be an inspirational speech, connecting with our emotions, our goals, our values. So that's going to be the primary goal of Bob's speech today. It's going to be the longest of the Confident Communicator speeches, so for our timer it will be an 8 to 10 minute speech. And during that time, Bob's going to stretch our interpretations of luck, of entitlement, how we persevere through different obstacles through our life, and how we end up on the other side of it. So please welcome Bob for his CC10 speech titled Lucky Man.
Oh, what a lucky man he was. I think most of us in this room probably feel pretty lucky in life. Most of us work here at Consumers, have a company that has nice pay, excellent benefits. Probably everybody here has a telephone. Probably everybody grew up in a house with indoor plumbing. And I'm going to guess, if I was to look around the room, every one of you would feel like you had a nickel of discretionary spending each and every week. I'm going to talk about someone that had none of that as he grew up, but he still considered himself a very lucky man. Think back, if you will, to a time when you were 13. Think about the responsibilities you had at age 13. Obviously, it's going to be an easier reach for some of you than it is for me. But think about those responsibilities. I'm thinking, make your bed, go to school, do your homework. Maybe you had some chores that you were assigned. You may or may not have got an allowance for doing those. But probably in most cases, pretty much 13-year-old specific type responsibilities. Based on that, and talking about sort of everything we have here, how many of you at this point feel pretty lucky in life? That life's been pretty good. That's what I thought. Now, think about this at age 13, when you were suddenly thrust into the responsibilities of running a 200-acre farm, milking cows, planting and harvesting crops, going to school, trying to be the first person in your family to earn a high school diploma. And oh, by the way, you were taking care of a younger brother and a recently widowed mother. That is what this lucky man faced when at age 13, his father suddenly died during the Great Depression. How many of you would have felt lucky to be in his shoes? Me either. I would have been overwhelmed. I wouldn't have been able to handle it. When I asked him about that, he said it was okay. He said they didn't have money. He said I couldn't afford a candy bar a week. There were no treats. But he said I was lucky. I grew up on a farm. When I got home from school that night, I knew there'd be food on the table. Many of my friends that lived in town were not that lucky. Here's somebody that felt lucky, growing up with all that responsibility in a home with no foundation, cutting wood for heat, probably getting only a few hours sleep each night, and I'm guessing carrying around the weight of the world on this 13-year-old's shoulders. Let's jump ahead a few years. He's no longer 13. He's now 20. This lucky man has actually finished high school now. He's got that first diploma in the family. He also, during that time, became the best baseball player in the area. He was actually lucky enough at age 20 to sign a contract with a professional baseball player. His life and his luck was going to take a dramatic change. For those of you that are history buffs, he signed that contract in the fall of 1941. And to quote, or paraphrase, I guess, President Roosevelt, a time that will go down in infamy. Yes, he signed that contract just before the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Without going into detail, he never followed that dream of being a professional baseball player. That ended with the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And when I asked him about that, you could see a little look of sadness that he didn't get to pursue that. But he said he felt lucky. He was living on a farm. Farmers were almost as valuable as soldiers at that time. There was only going to be one of the two brothers taken into the army. The youngest brother was now old enough to take over the farm. The older brother planned to enter the service whenever drafted, whenever requested. He was going to protect that younger brother one more time. Things changed. That younger brother immediately volunteered, and he went into the service. And as it turned out, both of those people ended up lucky. The younger brother, my uncle, served throughout the service, was never injured, lived to be 90. I guess as you can tell, my lucky man is my dad. Years later, when I asked my uncle, why did you volunteer? You knew Dad was going to go in. And like anyone from the greatest generation, he had an answer. And it was simple. He said, your dad had done so much for me and our mother. It was my turn to step up. Those people knew what had to happen. By the time the war ended, my father had decided baseball was no longer an option. But he had started to create his own luck by purchasing the farm from his mother. As I think I've talked about before, I had a pretty good life growing up on the farm. I enjoyed it. Excuse me. I got to see my dad a lot more than most kids get to see their dad. I watched him work 80 hours a week. That was pretty typical. But I think starting at age 13, those long hours just were inveterated in him. It was what he did. That was his norm. That inspired me to work hard in anything I did. And probably at about age 10, I started taking days off of school to help make sure the crops were planted in the spring, harvested in the fall, helping milk cows, did all those litany of activities that are on any small family farm. Even when he died, I think he felt lucky. He had cancer. And him, like me and my sister, had watched my mom suffer through cancer. She went from an active, lively woman, she essentially disintegrated into 80 pounds of semi-coma state at the end. Partially from the cancer, partially from the effects of radiation and chemotherapy. After Dad had contracted cancer, we went to talk to the doctor about possible diagnosis and any options he might have. The doctor said, I've actually got 3 options for you. He says, option 1, we'll do surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, and based on your age and general health, you'll probably live 5 years. He looked at it and he says, what's option 2? And he says, we won't do the surgery. We will simply do the radiation and chemotherapy. He kind of nodded his head, what's option 3? He said, we can talk today for a few minutes. Your expectation of life probably not as long as opposed to taking the other 2 options. But we can shake hands today. You can walk away, and I'll never see you again. I get sat there for a minute, looked at us kids, stood up, shook the doctor's hand, slowly walked away. Later, when I asked him why he chose option 3, he said, "I'm lucky. I have options. I'm going to fight this on my own terms. I don't have to go through chemotherapy." He did not end up suffering from the cancer. Shortly thereafter, he perished in a house fire. But even then, he was able to send me a signal or a sign, call it luck, whatever you want, that he was okay. That very night he passed away, he sent me a sign. My oldest son really struggled for several months with losing his grandfather that way. And one night he come back in and says, "Grandpa just sent me a sign. He's okay." And I had told him about the sign I got, but he sent him the same exact sign several months later that he was okay. People ask me, why is it I'm generally, not today obviously, but generally in a pretty upbeat mood? And I say it's easy. At a very young age, I was mentored by someone that inspired me, worked hard, set a great example, and appreciated, and I want to repeat, appreciated the things he had, which by most people's standards weren't much. Recently, a friend of mine posted something on Facebook, and I wanted to read it to you. And I think for those of you that have lost both parents, if this was Facebook, I'd be getting some likes. For those of you that have one or both parents alive, consider yourself lucky. You have an opportunity to take advantage of my note. When spending time with your parents seems like too much effort, remember, one day, all you'll have are the memories. In closing, I'd like you to think about just one thing. I'll ask you to do one thing. When you have one of those days when nothing is going your way, the world's luck is absolutely against you, pause for a moment and think about a very lucky 13-year-old boy growing up in the Depression, and see if that helps put your situation in perspective and provides you with the opportunity to be a very lucky person also. Thank you.